So I'll come in.
Okay.
And we're good. Good luck.
Good evening. I am not Pastor Mike. As you could see, I'm slightly shorter.
You're the other Mike Borghese.
Yeah.
I am related to Pastor Mike. Pastor Mike may join us later. I got this, and I mentioned this earlier. They asked for somebody, Pastor Mike asked for somebody to take his place, and everybody stepped backwards, and I was the only one up front.
Gotta be pastor.
That's what happens when you get old.
We've got some drills and things now, right, Steve?
I guess today is Ash Wednesday. It's the beginning of what a lot of Christians call the Lenten period. And I just wanted to describe a thing that I heard a long time ago, but it sort of struck me about bowls. Bowls that are mentioned during Easter time. And I'll start, and there were two bowls mentioned. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about preparation for Easter. Yesterday was Mardi Gras, better known as Fat Tuesday. It's sort of the day you're supposed to use all the fats in your home, all the greases and fats, because you're going to go into a time of fasting. And so it's...
Lost the whole crowd.
I'm with you.
So it's the last night you can eat rich, fatty foods before Ash Wednesday shows up, and I'll describe Ash Wednesday. And some areas have taken Mardi Gras, or Fat Tuesday, to the extreme, where they have festivals. And you end up with New Orleans, where this is a parade, festivals, and the biggest one is in Rio de Janeiro. And that's a big party. Now, it does come down to Lent, which is a term that the Catholics use, some denominations use, and it's a time of sacrifice and fasting. And what's supposed to happen is you're supposed to have only one major meal per day, and the other two meals are not supposed to, they should be combined, they should be less than that big full meal. And then there's no meat on Fridays. The Catholic Church used to have no meat on any Friday. But then they changed, I guess, in the 60s or 70s to just during Lent. And I'm not sure, I may be wrong, but I think a long time ago the fishing industry was hurting, so the church came out and said no meat on Friday, only fish. And if you notice, a lot of the cafeterias in the schools have fish on Fridays. And a lot of the kids show up at the nurse's office saying, my stomach hurts. And if she's a good school nurse, she has crackers and juice for them because they haven't eaten lunch. Okay. Today is Ash Wednesday. And it's supposed to be a day of reflection. It's the first day of Lent, and it's a service of penitence. You know, you're supposed to be praying. If you notice, Catholics will wear the mark of the cross on their forehead. And it's a reminder of ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I mean, it's biblical. And where they get the ashes, it's the burnt palm from the previous year's Palm Sunday. They don't want to just throw it out because they said it's blessed. So they burn it and they use it in their service on Ash Wednesday. One of the things, when I was a kid, I had a lot of friends. I grew up Catholic. So one of my friends, didn't want to go to the service. And there were a couple smokers in the crowd, and they knew they were going to go home. And so what they did, they took the ashes from their cigarettes and they used to cross it, and this way Mom and Dad would leave them alone.
So do they, at what point do they burn these and they store these all year?
Well, I think they burn them just before Wednesday.
Okay, so, but they've stored the palm
Yeah.
branches all year long.
all year long.
Wow.
And now it's nice and dry, and they probably go quick.
Yeah.
Did you know that when you were a Catholic that that's what they did? I didn't learn that
Yeah.
until today.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Lutheran. We had the same stuff. I had no idea where the ashes came from.
Well, but, you know, might be different. You know, we used to have we would let our parking lot be used by some Episcopal church and stuff sometimes, and they would do that, come through in the morning, and people would drive through, have ashes put on their foreheads, some little prayer form, I guess.
Now, Holy Week, I mean, you spend 40 days in prayer, and penitence, and then comes to Palm Sunday, and that's the day when Jesus triumphantly enters Jerusalem. And this is where the palms came in. People were waving palms. And some people had put coats, their outer garment down, so that the coat could walk on it. It was almost like a king was coming in, and literally he was. And, yeah, okay. But then, why was Jesus there? He was there to prepare for the Passover, the Seder, as it's called. It's a ceremonial dinner, and it's the telling of the story of how Israel got its freedom from Egypt. And it's very ceremonial, where you have the youngest in the room ask the questions, certain number of questions, and they're answered. And part of the ceremony is to drink wine. And there are 4 glasses of wine, 4 cups of wine. And this is held on Thursday night. And a lot of the Christian churches will call it Maundy Thursday. The Baptists, I guess we don't use Maundy Thursday, but that's other denominations have it. And I'll explain a little bit about, whoops. Am I going too far? Yeah. This is where the first bowl comes in. Maundy Thursday, and I think it's mandatum, meaning command. And it's washing of the saints' feasts. It's a religious rite observed by various Christian denominations, and many modern day churches practice it, denominations practices, and it could be a church ordinance. I mean, we have just baptism and the Lord's Supper, but some may include washing the feet, foot washing as a service. And I listed some of the groups that I know of that consider it important. There may be, some of the groups. And it's an elaborate ceremony. Okay, and it is biblical. If we look up 1 Samuel 25:41, in this passage, David, what did I do? This was a sign of showing humility and honor by washing feet. 1 Samuel, that was with Nabal. I don't know if you remember Nabal. Samuel had just died, And David was now with his army, and he came to this rich farmer named Nabal, and he asked for food and water for his troops, and Nabal refused. And his wife Abigail heard about it, and she was very struck that she knew her husband was going to get killed because David was now king. And what she did, she persuaded David not to kill him, and in a ceremony she washed his feet. She washed his feet, and what happened? Nabal just suddenly died, and David took Abigail as his wife. And then in John 12, Mary of Bethany, I'm not sure which Mary, I think it's Mary Magdalene, anointed Jesus' feet for gratitude of raising, it's Mary of Bethany, of raising Lazarus. We believe it's of raising her brother Lazarus from the dead. And they say that the washing of the feet may have been a preparation for Jesus' death and burial. And the early church practiced it. In Timothy, 1 Timothy 5:10, refers to a piety, submission, or humility. I mean, we could go through this, but
And Jesus washed his disciples' feet in the Last Supper
Yeah.
too.
and that's what I was going to get next. If somebody would like to read John 13, 1 through 5. Anybody?
Okay. Now before the feast of Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, wrapped it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him.
The basin is the first bowl I'm talking about. Jesus rose from the table, takes his outer garment, ties a towel around his waist, and he pours water in the bowl, and he washes their feet. That's a humbling thing. Usually a servant. Why would Jesus do it? Jesus was known as a rabbi at that point, a teacher. I mean, he had a certain notoriety. Now, I'm sure this made the disciples very uncomfortable. And you got to remember, all the pictures that they have of Jesus washing feet, they always show a table. Back then, the table didn't have legs. It was on the ground. So when you sat down, you were reclined, and your feet showed. Just think of Jesus being across from Matthew and seeing the dirt on Matthew's feet. I mean, does that sound like you're going to have a delicious meal? You ever walk around in sandals?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you take off the sandals, and what do you got to do? Your feet aren't very clean.
Gotta trace the lines of your sandals on your feet.
And this is supposed to be a task that servants are supposed to perform. No? Did I just do that? Yeah, why did Jesus do it? You got to think about it. When Jesus came, he came down to serve. He didn't come down to lead. When Jesus was giving his disciples an example of humility, he knew that his hour was coming close, and he loved the people around him. And you know how much he loved them? He washed Judas's feet. Can somebody read? Whoops. Oops, I went backwards. What did I do wrong? Yeah, but this is. Did I cover this? I guess I'm missing I just want to describe a little bit about the Passover too. I said it was a party, celebrating meal. You recline at the table. If you see the chosen, whenever you see them sitting down or they're laying down on pillows at the table. Your feet are at the level of the table. And foot washing is a menial task. To take the road dust, and sometimes a servant would do it. Yep, I did that. Okay, could somebody read John 13, 6 through 11?
I got it. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "The one who has bathed does not need to wash, except for his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean. But not every one of you, for he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, not all of you are clean."
When he said Peter was clean, I think it meant more the fact that Peter knew who Jesus was and accepted Christ as being the Messiah. And that's why he said he was clean spiritually. But his outer feet were dirty. And, not all were clean was referring to Judas. Peter, at this point, didn't understand all of this. Why? Oops. Talk a little bit about Judas. Maybe this was biased by the gospel writers, but Jesus' calling of Judas is not mentioned in the Gospels. You read about the others being called, but he is included as one of the 12 all the time. Judas held the money bag. He was a thief. That's also mentioned. Where do I have that? I think it's in John 12, 5 and 6. It says he was a thief. Whatever went into that bag, he took out. And that's when Judas protested the jar of perfume poured on Jesus' feet. Jesus responded with his impending death. And if you notice, after that scene, when Jesus rebuked Judas, because Judas said that we could have sold the perfume and give it to the poor, Judas now goes off. Jesus, it's that very next statement where Judas is gone. Could somebody read Matthew 26, 14 and 16?
Oh, yes. Then one of the 12 followers went to talk to the leading priest. This was a follower named Judas Iscariot. He said, I will hand Jesus over to you. What will you pay me for doing this? The priest gave him 30 silver coins. After that, Judas waited for the best time to hand Jesus over to them.
I mean, you know somebody's going to do you wrong. How do you feel?
The scary part is, I think that sounds like my daughter.
You feel sold out sometimes.
Well, yeah. Will you watch Layla? Give me $30. Yeah.
I think there's a point where sometimes you know that a situation is inevitable. Where you know that a relationship is or something is dwindling, it's not going to end well, and it's
There's no path where it can end.
trying to find the most peaceful way to dissolve the relationship to where it's not ugly, you know.
I think
Yeah.
the reason that he's not named is like when you know that somebody has done wrong, you don't want to put like fame, give them that mention. Like until just recently, people that committed crimes and like that, they weren't getting their 15 minutes of fame all over social media.
Yeah.
So before it was like their name was kind of stricken from the books and things like that.
They said here in John 12:2 that the devil prompted Judas to betray Jesus. Now Jesus goes to pray, and his disciples couldn't stay awake. And I kept on thinking about it. This is right after the Passover meal. And you remember I said there were 4 cups of wine?
Yes.
But Jesus also participated in those 4 cups. And he was able to stay awake and pray. And then Judas shows up with this army, and he goes over and kisses Jesus on the cheek. You know, in Proverbs 6, 27:6, could someone read that for me?
Yep. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses.
An enemy multiplies kisses. So you now know that it's an enemy. And it's profuse or it's exuberant are the kisses of an enemy. You know, this is, you would think that they always talk about the Christian holy kiss, but this was not a holy kiss. This was a kiss to, I guess, describe, show who Jesus was. Now here's where the second bowl comes in. Jesus now is brought before Pontius Pilate. Historically, this exists. They were contemporaries. There were eyewitnesses. Pilate was convinced that Jesus was innocent. His wife had a dream. And she's very prophetic that don't do it. And Pilate protested to the Jews. And if you read those 2 quotes, what evil has he done? I find no crime in him. He didn't want to do it. And Pilate personally did not wish to see Jesus crucified. Jesus was guilty of no crime. So what does he do? He sends him over to Herod. Let Herod take care of it. And what happened? Herod sends him back. And so now Pilate has to cave to the popular demand of the people. He did not want a riot. He did not want to see these people right. I mean, you have to understand that Pilate, I'm assuming that this was his last service, and he didn't want to go back to Rome. This was easy, an easy job for him. And he just wanted to wait out his days. And washing of hands is a Jewish tradition too. David washed his hands in Psalm 26 as innocents. I wash my hands, dear Lord. He was trying to show God that he was an innocent man. I guess maybe I have this. I went too far. And it was he wanted to bless God. And in Deuteronomy, when they're talking, if you find a slain heifer in a field between two towns, and you didn't want to shed blood, what you did was wash your hands over the slain heifer, and so you were absolved. It was also a Roman tradition of washing hands before temple's sacrifice or absolving guilt. You wash your hands. And also, let's remember, even though Pilate did not want to crucify Jesus Christ, he was not a nice guy. You know, for him, sending one more person to get executed, big deal. I don't care. And Pilate was a coward. He had a bowl of water. He washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I'm innocent of this man's blood. It's not my problem. And it was a symbolic protest. He was protesting the death of Jesus. And just think of it. He could have prevented Jesus from being crucified. If he did not go listen to mob rule, he was trying to avoid a riot, and he was trying to avoid being removed from office. And I just have a picture of Pilate washing his hands. He's saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. You know, I want no part of it. So he gets his soldiers to do the job. Now, we think of this bowl and we say about this bowl, it's cruelty that he washed his hands. But if you think about the plan, the central plan of the whole deal, the whole thing was atoning the sacrifice of Jesus at Calvary. It showed human wickedness, the malice of the mob, the weakness of Pilate, brought about a blessing of God to us. Because if Jesus wasn't crucified, we would not have been blessed. And I just want to show the comparison of the two bowls. The first bowl was humility, humbleness, and servanthood. The second bowl was hate, anger, weakness, and turning away from the truth. And that's all I have to say.
Pretty good, though.
That's why when I think about it, you think about the two bowls. One is of love and servanthood. The other one is of sort of neglect and not caring. So you have two separate bowls in one instance. And are there any questions? I'm not a theologian, so don't get too...
And I think the second one also, the selfishness.
Yeah,
He was only
selfishness.
thinking about himself.
Oh, and you know, this is what got me. Pilate didn't want to have anything to do with this, but he's one of the names that goes down in history.
Yeah.
You don't name your kid Pilate.
No, you're not gonna name him, no.
No,
Well, Pontius. I guess. I mean, think about it. His wife, that's why I said his wife was prophetic in the sense, don't do it. So she knew something was going to happen. And here we are, 2,000 years later, 2,200 years later, and his name still pops up. And it pops up every year. So,
There's an interesting other way to look at some of that, you know, Peter's asking, you know, says, you know, Jesus, wash all of me and stuff, and he says, okay. No, you don't need to be washed all of you, need to do that. Some people say that maybe that's kind of analogous to us as a Christian. When we sin, we don't have to get saved again. What we need to do is to, you know, cleanse the relationship by asking forgiveness that way. And so then, you know, it kind of gets a picture that way that we don't have to be saved again, but that we've already been washed. We are clean in that sense.
that's right.
Yeah.
So our relationship is damaged.
And if you're wearing sandals, go home and wash your feet.
I will.
We can do it for each other.
Yeah.
So is that a colorized photo of Pontius there? The original black and white?
Edited for clarity.
Okay.
I mean, you know,
I thought they only had black and white back then.
but it's sort of interesting that.
That is camping.
Ted Turner got a hold of that one.
Pastor Mike told me I had to make reference. Let me get back. Whoops. Did I just lose it? Pastor Mike told me I had to get back to this one. No. Oh, this one works with a mouse. Did I lose the mouse?
Can you double click on the pad and it'll probably.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Pastor Mike said, I have to make reference to this. It was done by somebody by Ford Maddox Brown. It's somewhere in London, that's all I know. It's a painting, it shows Jesus looking like a servant, Peter looking very humble. And the way his expression to me is he's not happy. The one thing I find wrong is with the table. It should be down here somewhere.
Peter looks very old there, and at that time
Yeah.
he might not have been, so.
Yeah.
Well, some of us gray early.
Yeah, I understand. I understand.
Jeff School's got gray hair.
What?
So Jeff School's got gray hair.
Does it?
Really?
My
Yes,
mom
she
had
has.
gray hair at 18.
And Pastor Mike, if he lets his beard grow, he's all gray.
Yeah.
So,
What do you think he's feeling?
yeah.
He's confused.
And they still don't understand what's going to happen. Even though throughout the Gospels you hear him saying, you know, time is not right yet. And,
Well, I mean, but even to this day, there are Jewish people that even though you can see how all of it lines up, they're still in denial.
in denial. And I grew up in a Hasidic neighborhood, and I can tell you, they're still waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Every now and then, some old rabbi will pass away, and they run around claiming he is the Messiah, but it's happened quite often. In fact, there was one rabbi that passed away during COVID, and New York went crazy because the streets just filled with his mourners. And at that time, you couldn't be near anybody, you had to wear masks. Those very big neighborhoods. In fact, a long time ago, there was a beer commercial, and they said there are more Jews in New York City than there are in Israel. So, So anyway, I don't, we're still on the feed?
Yes. Let me
I'll
know
be
when.
talking.
We're fine to close if we want to close out.
Sure, I think
Alright.
I said enough.